a shocking twist of events, Azerbaijan is openly challenging Russia, showcasing a significant shift in power dynamics that could reshape the post-Soviet landscape. Why now, and what does it mean for the future? For anyone not deeply immersed in international affairs, it appeared to be just another typical day in the Russian Federation. On June 27th, authorities in the city of Yekaterinburg apprehended numerous foreign residents. The justification offered was stark, yet not uncommon. The individuals were accused of a series of organized crime killings that had occurred 2 decades prior. What transpired next was also far from surprising. While in custody, 2 of the detainees, Hussein and Zian Saparov, died under mysterious circumstances. Although the official police account didn't explicitly state, they had coincidentally tumbled from a window after discharging a firearm into their own backs 5 times. The overall impression conveyed was unmistakably in that vein, especially once images emerged showing other arrested individuals with obvious signs of severe physical abuse and torment. Indeed, as the saying goes, merely another day within President Putin's authoritative regime. However, this time, it was different uncharacteristically. So the arrested individuals were all ethnically Azeri members of the sizable diaspora, residing in Russia with heritage tracing back to the former Soviet Republic of Azerbaijan, while the mistreatment of the nation's post-Soviet minorities by law enforcement is not unusual. What stood out was the unprecedented Azeri reaction. Generally, the role of former Soviet republics still within Moscow's sphere of influence is to exhibit deference to the Kremlin, to adhere to its directives, and refrain from even hinting at Russian misdeeds, regardless of how flagrant Moscow's conduct might be. In a scenario like this one, would typically expect the Azerbaijani government to maintain a neutral public stance, even if the elite in Baku harbored private resentment. What was entirely unforeseen, however, was the actual response. 4 days after the arrests in Yekaterinburg, Azerbaijani authorities conducted raids on the administrative offices of Sputnik, a Russian state-sponsored media outlet. In a deliberate mirroring of the Yekaterinburg events, the apprehended Sputnik executives were paraded before cameras. The very next day, 8 more Russian nationals were taken into custody on drug-related charges. Photographs suggested they too had been subjected to beatings. While detained, as the Center for European Policy Analysis remarked, the public display of Sputnik executives signaled something unparalleled. A former Soviet republic openly shaming Moscow without any discernible apprehension of repercussions. Had the events concluded there, it would still have been noteworthy, a clear signal from Baku that it no longer feared Moscow. But instead of simply evening the score and stopping, the administration of President Ilham Aliyev continued to escalate the situation. As if determined to make an emphatic statement on the very day the arrested Russians were assaulted, Baku initiated an investigation. Deaths of the Azeri suspects in Yekaterinburg. Cultural gatherings featuring Russian performers were cancelled, while Azerbaijan's media, which maintains close ties with the government, reportedly broadcast over 100 reports in a single day condemning Russia's treatment of post-Soviet minorities. The state-operated channel even went so far as to liken Russia to Nazi Germania, truly masterful piece of provocation, given the Kremlin's persistent assertion that its conflict in Ukraine is a fight against Nazism. Yet the ramifications are profoundly real, as the Jamestown Foundation observed. The Yekaterinburg raids, coupled with other grievances, have driven Azerbaijan-Russia relations to their lowest point in the post-Soviet period. If one only occasionally tracks news from the Caucasus region, this might come as a surprise. After all, it was less than 2 years ago that Russian media outlets were echoing Azeri narratives regarding Baku's assumption of control over the breakaway region of Nagorno-Karabakh. Wasn't the prevailing view at that time that the relationship between Putin and Aliyev was strengthening, to which one can only respond? A considerable amount has transpired since then. The initial point to grasp is that Russia's apparent acquiescence to the conquest of Nagorno-Karabakh was always more of a facade than a genuine strategic maneuver by President Putin. Following the 2020 conflict, Russian peacekeepers had been deployed to the area, and it was widely understood that the Kremlin intended to leverage their presence over both Azerbaijan and Armenia, whose ethnic populations resided in the enclave. However, by 2023, the Kremlin found itself so deeply entangled in Ukraine that it lacked the capacity to prevent Azerbaijan's takeover, even if it had desired to, although 5 Russian peacekeepers lost their lives to Azeri forces presenting the situation as part of some larger strategic design might have been the least undesirable option for Moscow, particularly since Azerbaijan's primary military benefactor was Turkmen nation. Putin was desperate to maintain in a somewhat neutral posture. Regarding the Ukrainian conflict, thus the perceived alignment between Aliyev and Putin concerning Nagorno-Karabakh was always something of an illusion, but it was the events of Christmas Day 2024 that truly shattered that illusion. On that day, an Azerbaijani aircraft was downed over the city of Grozny by Russian air defenses, which evidently misidentified it as a Ukrainian drone. Out of the 67 individuals aboard, 38 perished, although Putin eventually offered condolences, he steadfastly refused to accept responsibility. It appears that Aliyev has never forgiven this slight. As a member of the Azerbaijani parliament, Tural Gali recently declared Azerbaijan has not forgotten the downed civilian aircraft, and Russia's silence will not be tolerated. Since that incident, tensions between Moscow and Baku have been quietly escalating. In February, Baku shuttered the local Russian cultural center, seemingly in retaliation for the airline disaster. Just weeks later, a major cyberattack believed to originate from Russia targeted Azeri media outlets. In response, Baku ordered the local branch of Sputnik, the very same one raided on July 1st, to cease operations. However, the propaganda outlet seemingly defied the order and remained open, likely at Moscow's direction. Up to that point, though everything still seemed to fall within the realm of customary diplomatic friction, the Azeris were clearly irritated, but Russia was still employing its familiar script for dealing with nations it had wronged: obfuscate, deny, decline to apologize, and if necessary retaliate. Consider the Kremlin's reaction after it was revealed in 2021 that a deadly explosion at a Czech ammunition depot 7 years prior had been orchestrated by Russian operatives. In that instance, the Kremlin escalated hybrid warfare against Prague, even officially designating the Czech Republic as an enemy state. But while the Czechs expelled Russian diplomats, the Azeris have gone even further, and they have done so without the protection of NATO that Prague enjoys. The crucial question then is what triggered this intense response. What was it about the Yekaterinburg incident that compelled Baku to amplify its reaction to such an extreme degree? And what insights can this offer us regarding the broader geopolitical landscape? Firstly, it underscores just how significantly Moscow's standing has diminished in certain parts of the post-Soviet sphere. 5 years ago, it would have been unimaginable for Azerbaijan to so openly challenge its former imperial power. After all, it was Russia's intervention that halted the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, short of a complete Azeri triumph. But now Baku perceives its former overlord as mired in Ukraine and isolated on the global stage. Simultaneously, Azerbaijan boasts an expanding network of influential allies. It receives backing from Turkey, acquires weaponry from Israel, enjoys support from Pakistan and China, and supplies natural gas to the European Union. Moreover, international sanctions have left Moscow reliant on Baku to facilitate connections to markets like Iran and India. In essence, the balance of power has shifted, yet the Kremlin stubbornly refuses to acknowledge this new reality. And there is little more exasperating than being treated as a subordinate by someone you now consider an equal, as Zakhar Shev of the Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center conveyed to the New York Times. Russia seems to desire a relationship like it has with Belarus. Dependence on Moscow political loyalty and accepting Russia as the senior partner. But Azerbaijan doesn't see it that way. It wants equal, respectful relations. This issue is not exclusive to Russia. Other former imperial powers struggle to redefine their relationships with their former colonies, as evidenced by France's perception in West Africa, or Britain's dismissive approach to Irish concerns about a hard border during Brexit negotiations. However, the Azerbaijani example is particularly extreme. This is a nation that has utilized its post-independence oil wealth to develop into a formidable military force, one supported by the significant regional power of Turkey, yet it still feels condescended to by its former master. Speaking to Al Jazeera political analyst Emil Mustaf, framed the deaths of Azeris in police custody in Yekaterinburg within a broader context of ethnic grievance, stating the killing of Azeris is a link in a chain of tendentious politics, where ethnic minorities are used as a lightning rod. This is not just a tragedy, this is a symptom of a deep sickness of Russian society. Of course, it's important not to convey the impression that issues of respect are the sole motivating factors rather than an emotional reaction to the Kremlin's overreach. Some analysts view Baku's actions as a far more calculated maneuver. Carnegie Politica, for instance, published an analysis suggesting that Aliyev might simply be attempting to ascertain what concessions he can extract from Putin. As a separate commentary, in Middle East points out, Azerbaijan's primary objective, currently, is the establishment of the Zangezur corridor across southern Armenia narrow strip that would link the Azeri mainland with its exclave of Nakhchivan and its ally Turkey. First proposed during the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh war, the original plan for the corridor involved oversight by Russian peacekeepers. It is possible that Aliyev's aim is to force concessions that would entirely exclude Moscow from the process. Alternatively, Aliyev's defiance of Russia could simply be a public relations strategy, a calculated pose to enhance his credibility both domestically and internationally. At home, because Aliyev needs to reinforce his image as a strongman and protector of all Azeris. Abroad, because Azerbaijan is presently striving to maintain a delicate balance between Russia and the West, and avoid appearing too closely aligned with either. Thus, a highly public dispute with Putin could potentially endear Aliyev to the Europeans who are purchasing his country's gas. As for the broader geostrategic implications, the encouraging news is that this situation is unlikely to escalate into anything resembling outright conflict, even in the diplomatic sense, despite his willingness to challenge Putin. Aliyev recognizes that Azerbaijan remains profoundly dependent on Russia. The Carnegie analysis notes that Russia is Azerbaijan's largest market for its agricultural exports, while Baku imports substantial quantities of raw materials from its northern neighbor. Moreover, Azeris residing in Russia send back significant remittances. According to the website Caucasus Watch, nearly $500 million flowed from Russia to Azerbaijan just last year. Conversely, Putin likewise understands that he cannot afford to thoroughly alienate Baku, if only because a truly harsh reaction would provoke a response from Turkey. So do not anticipate this to erupt into a genuine, lasting rupture between Azerbaijan and Russia. Even Aliyev's recent telephone conversation with Zelensky is probably best understood as a pointed reminder to the Kremlin that the Azerbaijani president possesses alternative options rather than an indication of Baku shifting irrevocably into the Western sphere. However, the fact that this episode will likely soon subside does not mean it is without consequences. From the moment the Soviet Union disintegrated, Russia meticulously worked to ensure it remained the dominant power among post-Soviet states. In some regions like Moldova or Nagorno-Karabakh, this involved fostering frozen conflicts. In others, such as Estonia, it entailed attempting to destabilize the government with cyberattacks. In still others, like Georgia and Ukraine, it meant overt invasion and occupation. In all instances, the implicit understanding was that Russia remained the Eurasian superpower, a nation so formidable that only a government intent on self-destruction would dare to defy it without the explicit backing of NATO. Today, that is no longer the case, with the three-day special military operation in Ukraine now well into its third. It is clearer than ever that Russia is no longer the invincible hegemon it once portrayed itself to be. Dangerous, yes, brutal, exceptionally so, but a force before which all post-Soviet nations, except for the fortunate few within NATO, must prostrate themselves. Not even close. As a member of the Azerbaijani parliament, Rasim Musabyev conveyed to DW, Baku no longer sees Moscow as an external power in a position to dictate the rules in the Caucasus. And Baku is not alone in this assessment. Just across the border, Armenia, once among Russia's closest partners, is desperately striving to cultivate favor with the West. Moldova and Ukraine are actively seeking entry into the European Union. In Central Asia, China is beginning to appear as a more appealing partner to nations ranging from Kazakhstan to Uzbekistan, while there are post-Soviet states drawing closer to Moscow, notably Belarus. And to a degree, Georgia's overarching trend is a discernible waning of Moscow's influence in many respects. It's ironic, isn't it, when Putin dispatched his troops streaming across Ukraine's borders in February 2022, he gambled everything on a swift victory that would solidify Russia's standing as a superpower on par with America or China. Flash forward to today, however, and that status is visibly eroding. Russia is now dependent on China, unable to effectively aid allies like Iran during wartime, and in the Kremlin's view, disrespected by upstart former colonies like Azerbaijan. All that remains for Putin is to try and bring the house down, orchestrating the deaths of Ukrainians on a vast scale, as if body count alone is what confers respect upon a nation. As the Center for European Policy Analysis writes, and we quote them, power is as much about perception as reality. When Azerbaijan can arrest Russian state media leadership and parade them on television, when this generates not Russian tanks, but Russian excuses, everyone watching understands the new reality. If this flare-up in the Caucasus is any indication, while the days of Russia posing a danger to its neighbors may not be over, the days of Moscow being a respected world power almost certainly are. Thank you for watching. What are your thoughts on Azerbaijan's bold actions against Russia? Share below.